Approximately 6.5 million animals enter U.S. animal shelters nationwide every year. This means that millions of heartless people are dropping their animals off. People should have unconditional love for their pets, but instead they are getting rid of them. Not only is it appalling that people are willing to give up on their pet, it makes the shelters and shelter workers overwhelmed. How is it possible to feed, bathe, and care for 6.5 million animals every day? Shelter workers are putting in crazy amounts of time and effort into caring for the animals that you are easily getting rid of. But the conditions of shelters are still awful because of overpopulation and limited funding. The millions of unkind people dropping off their animals to shelters are to blame for the bad conditions. When a person finds the smallest thing wrong with their pet, many are quick to drop it off at a shelter. No matter how much shelter workers advocate for animals to be adopted, shelters are overpopulated and do not have enough space to properly provide for the animals. Veterinarian Heather Hunt describes a typical day at an animal shelter. On Monday, they start out the week with 80 dogs and 80 cats. Someone comes in to surrender their 13-year-old golden retriever that has lived with them forever. They're moving and can't be burdened by an arthritic dog with a weak bladder anymore. 20 minutes later, 2 dogs that were adopted on Saturday have been brought back because they peed inside the house. 3 cats come in, all from the same place. Their owner died and the daughter wants nothing to do with the litter boxes. There are not enough kennels, cages, or room for animals to live and run around, nor is there enough money for the food needed for them. If people keep the animals they buy, shelters can put in more time, effort, and money towards the animals who desperately need a home. The overpopulation and not enough space or money leads to animals being euthanized. Do you really want to bring your dog to a shelter and have them, with their innocent-looking face and big brown eyes, be killed a little while later because no one is adopting them? The shelter workers try to not have to euthanize any animals, but because of the limited space, they have to do it. So if you are thinking about bringing an animal to a shelter, remember that you are the one that is causing an innocent animal to die. If people were to keep their animals, then there would be more space and food at the shelter for animals with no home, and thus no animals would be euthanized. Many times I'm watching TV and all of a sudden a commercial from a shelter appears encouraging people to adopt. It shows footage of skinny, sad dogs whimpering in the corner of crates. I always think to myself, how can a person voluntarily cause a living thing to have such a hard life? It breaks my heart that animals need to suffer through terrible things that are completely out of their control. Changes need to start happening to prevent more animals from being turned in, which will then cause the conditions of shelters to get better. First, when considering buying an animal, think about what you are getting yourself into. Animals are hard work. Second, keep your animal for life. Nothing is sadder than a person bringing in a dog that they have had for years because they are moving or just don't have time for it anymore. Next, when you get an animal, you should spay or neuter it, which will help reduce the overpopulation in shelters. Most importantly, people should adopt animals. Shelter pets have every bit as much love to give as one from a breeder. This being said, please treat your pets well and stop people from dropping their animals off at a shelter.